literally do not know where February went. The shorter days at the beginning of the month really started to get to me. My work exploded a little bit. I haven't been able to make as much TikTok videos. There just hasn't been enough time to make things that I have wanted to make and do the reading that I've wanted to do in the month of February. However, ever the hopeful optimist, March hopefully promises some different energy. I'm going on a little trip with my family for spring break, and I'm hoping that that will give me ample time for just like blasting through a few of the novels that I think are sort of piling up on my want to read list. But another thing that I'm leaving behind this year is being dedicated to this like number in my brain of how many books I have to read. Like, girl, you are already ahead of the curve. I saw a really depressing article from the Washington Post that said that if you read even one or two novels a year, you are officially an endangered species. Like, people are not reading books. I have to take the pressure off. If I only read 50 books this year, okay, I'm doing it because it's what I enjoy and that's how I learn. That's one of the primary ways that I expand my mind. There's something about reading that, like, even though you're not the writer, something about your soul is being expressed through these books. It's such a beautiful experience. So I wax poetic. Heading into March, I am still continuing my immersive read with Beloved. What is an immersive read, you ask? It is when you read the book and listen to the audiobook at the same time. And what's cool about this book is that Toni Morrison herself sat down and read the novel. And so that recording is on audiobooks.com. Hearing her inflections and her pauses and the way that she intends the words on the page to be heard or to be experienced is so cool. I wrote about this on my Substack, how these heavier books that I'm reading, I am going to develop a reading map. I am going to use Beloved as the anchor text. So this is kind of what is grounding my reading journey for the month, my reading curriculum, if you will. And then I am pairing an echo with this anchor. And the echo for this month is going to be a couple poems by Langston Hughes. One of them is Harlem. And they're just taking some of the themes, the experiences, the culture that she is portraying in Beloved and giving it a different voice with the different medium of poetry. And then in combination with both the anchor and the echo, I am expanding my reading into nonfiction. And the book I've chosen is something that I've been reading slowly since September, and it's called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And this is a really in depth look at the Great Migration that took place amongst newly emancipated Black Americans all the way up until, I want to say, the 1930s, 1940s, this northern mobility, the northern movement of many Black Americans, as it became clear that the South still was holding on to Jim Crow era laws, Jim Crow era segregation. And Isabel Wilkerson looks at how this Great Migration shaped a lot of the cities and culture of the North itself. What connects these three in my reading curriculum is this theme that I'm personally very interested in, is a sense of place. Toni Morrison uses a sense of place to show how her characters are straddling their past and their present. Place often dictates your memories, your identity, and certainly, therefore, your culture. Langston Hughes talks a lot about places in his poems as these characters for the Black experience. And likewise, in The Warmth of Other Suns, Isabel Wilkerson is literally showing us how place changed from South to North, what that meant for these people that were enduring and undergoing this journey and this transformation. And so I'm kind of using that as the lens in which I am reading Beloved and exploring other pieces of media. And I want to do a reading map for my reading curriculum every month going forward. I encourage you to make your own. Find a book that maybe it's a classic. Let's just use that as an example. Have the classic be your anchor piece. And then as you're reading this classic and you're picking up on themes, or something strikes your interest with one of the characters, or a historical event that's being portrayed, find a poem, find an article, find something that echoes that in another piece of media, and then find maybe a nonfiction or, again, a long form journalistic article or a primary source to really ground that reading in something immediately applicable to your day to day life or to conversations that you're having with people. That's kind of infused some excitement back into my monthly reading that I've been kind of missing since Christmas. Now, I know I just sat here and told you all about how I'm not going to hold myself accountable to a number this year. I do still want to talk about what I hope to read in March. A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing is what this is called. It's by Alice Evelyn Yang. The reason that this book sounds really interesting to me is the family dynamics and the family saga that plays out over multiple generations. That seems to be a theme that I've been encountering in a lot of my reading with like Beloved, East of Eden, and now with this one. And it's a genre I don't typically tend to pick up, which is magical realism, but I feel like the themes and the exploration of this family really will give itself an interesting perspective. But what's super cool is that it's also grounded in real history of the Japanese occupation of Manchuria. So we are getting a lot in this book, and I'm very intrigued to see how Alice Evelyn Yang fits that into a novel that's less than 400 pages. But can we take a moment to look at this author photo? Stunning. I recently started Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I read Heart the Lover last year, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. This kind of teeters the line of lit fic and popular fiction. I like how she incorporates writing and literature into the lives of her characters and the plot itself. And so this one follows Casey, who is a struggling writer, and she's struggling because she recently lost her mother suddenly. The experience of her grappling with her grief and facing challenges in her love life, a lot of her memories are being featured in the first few pages, balancing between this man and her mom. And it's really beautiful. I love how Lily King just so successfully drops us into the heart of her character. The next book that I'm going to do is briefly A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. I did talk about this in my prior video, so I won't go too into detail, but in case you missed that one, this is a ghost story told by Blanca, who's a 14-year-old ghost, and she haunts this convent or monastery where one day she sees this young couple. They are in the midst of a passionate love affair. She's witnessing the love affair of George Sand and Frederick Chopin. Frederick Chopin being the composer and George Sand being the author. Her witnessing their love causes her to reflect on her experiences of love and loss when she was still alive. Two more books, the first being The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I have never read anything by H.G. Wells before. I don't read a ton of science fiction. I want to engage with that genre a little bit more. So I'm starting with one of the classics. It kind of shows how human depravity can very quickly take the place of scientific curiosity. Dr. Moreau is a scientist who is performing very inhumane, unspeakable experiments on animals and attempting to turn them into human-like creatures. And it raises a ton of ethical questions, moral questions. So I'm going to kind of go into the book focusing less on maybe the science fiction element and more on those like moral and ethical standpoints in the book. And then this is the book I'm most excited to read this month. It is The Door by Magda Szabo. I decided to buy it because I have fallen in love with Magda Szabo's writing. She's one of Hungary's most prolific authors. And in The Door, she explores a very unconventional, unsettling relationship between two women where it very quickly borders on obsession with one another. I love books that really, really dial in to a character's psyche and subconscious and how that is expressed in their day-to-day behavior. If you've read any of these books, please let me know. Hop in the comments. Let me know what I'm in for. Booker long list was announced today, and I've got my laptop here, and I kind of wanted to just go through like my top 5 most excited to read from this list of, I think, 13 books they pick. The first one that really caught my attention was The Wax Child by Olga Ravin, translated by Martin Aitken, and this is translated from Danish. It's a chilling story about female power, brutality, nature, and magic, and a dizzying insight into a 17th century worldview. So, if you think about like the United States and what was happening here in the 16th century, it was Salem witch trials all over the place. So, this is based on an actual 17th century witch trial that also took place in Denmark. This one just sounded great. I am also really interested in Women Without Men by Sharnush Parsipur. This is translated from Persian by Feridun Forokh. I am very invested in and interested in stories about other women, particularly when it is from a culture and a background vastly different than my own. So this one kind of interweaves the stories of many different women. One is a wealthy housewife, one is a sex worker. They live wildly different lives, and yet their stories intertwine and explore life on the outskirts of Tehran. And there's Islamic influence. This book specifically goes into Islamic mysticism, recent Iranian history, and watches these women attempt to reimagine their lives without men at the center. The Witch by Marie Ndiaye sounded so good. It's another witch story, but in this one, a woman who is a mediocre witch tries to pass on her gifts to her twin daughters, but she doesn't realize yet that they actually contain powers vastly beyond her own until they go through their sort of womanhood initiation, which is indicative of when a person will cry blood in this book. Her daughters do that, and then they literally fly the nest, like literally fly the nest. And so there is dreamlike elements, magical realism, it's unsettling. It explores family legacy, family dynamics, who is responsible for family failure. I am very intrigued by books that explore the dark side of family life. We Are Green and Trembling by Gabriela Cabezon Camara, translated from Spanish by Robin Myers. This is a queer, baroque, tender, and surreal novel that conveys glimmers of hope for the future within the brutal colonial history of Latin America. And while the description of the book does not use this label because it wouldn't have existed in colonial Latin America, but Antonio is a trans man. And when he writes a letter to his aunt, we learn that she is the prioress of a convent that he escaped as a young girl. And so that takes us on this journey with Antonio into the numerous guises that he has had to wear in order to survive what he came from and where he is now. It's a unique look at the critique of religious tyranny, the mistreatment of women, children, indigenous. I think this was the 4th book. The 5th book that I'm really also looking for, it's another book centered around Tehran and Iranian culture. This is written by Shida Baziar. It's called The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran, and it's set across 4 decades from 1979, when the Cultural Revolution took place in Iran, all the way up to 2009. It centers around Behzad, who's a young communist revolutionary who, is more or less hopeful for a new order after the Shah's expulsion. And so, of course, this book looks at Iran being completely flipped inside out and what that did to families, what it did to political ideology and resistance, the desire for freedom. So a lot of themes are put front and center with Baziar's book. If you have seen the long list and there's something on your list that you really want to get to, let me know what you're excited about reading. These all sound really interesting. It's definitely shaken up my 2026 TBR a little bit. husband and I are heading to Milwaukee for the evening. My birthday is this weekend, and so we're going to celebrate a little bit early and head to a German restaurant for some delicious drinks and food. And then afterwards, we're going to hop over to a place called the Jazz Estate, and it's one of Milwaukee's most well-frequented jazz clubs for some cocktails and just live music. I've heard really good things about the Jazz Estate. I'm excited to finally try it out. So I'm gonna wrap up the vlog on that note. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that your March brings all of the creative energy that you want and need this month, and that you have beautiful days ahead.